Ever notice how the people with the most to lose are always the first to tell you who you're allowed to love? Like love needs permission slips signed by skin color, bank statements, or spotless family trees. It's twisted, isn't it? Because here's the ugly truth. Some of the wealthiest families you'll ever meet have the coldest hearts, while the poorest neighborhoods teach the deepest kinds of love. This isn't one of those soft-focus stories that ends with polite applause. It's messy, it's raw. It's the forbidden love between a poor black athlete who grew up dodging more struggles than most people could survive, and a millionaire's daughter who spent her life learning how to hide behind perfect smiles. When their two worlds collided, it wasn't just sparks. It was a wildfire. They faced everything you dread in your worst nightmares. Controlling parents who'd rather watch them break than see them happy, friends who turned into strangers overnight, cruel rumors that felt like tiny knives. Nights were long, heavy with tears of love and whispers like, "What if this destroys us?" All while clinging to a hope so fragile it sometimes hurt just to hold on to it. But here's what makes their story different. It isn't just about romance. It's about what happens when your heart dares to want what the world says you can't have. It's about standing up to every snide remark, every slammed door, every shameful look, just to keep holding one person's hand. So stay right here, because by the end of this, you might find yourself wondering, is love really enough to beat everything stacked against it? Or are some battles simply too big, even for soulmates who were destined to find each other in the first place? From the time Marcus could remember, the narrow streets of his neighborhood were always alive with laughter and struggle dancing side by side. Kids raced bikes over cracked sidewalks while their mothers called them in for dinner. The scent of fried chicken and collard greens wrapping around each porch. His home was small, paint peeling from years of sun and rain, but inside it pulsed with forbidden love and undying devotion. A family determined to write their own miracle of destiny, despite prejudice and racism lurking at every corner. His father worked long hours at a factory that paid just enough to keep the lights on, and his mother cleaned wealthy homes where she often returned with humiliation hidden behind her tired smile. But each night, they gathered around a wobbly kitchen table, hands holding secretly beneath, whispering promises of a better life for Marcus. Even back then, it was clear they were soulmates, bound by something stronger than hardship. Watching them, Marcus learned early on that true love wasn't flashy. It was quiet, fierce, and willing to sacrifice everything. At school, Marcus stood out for more than just being the tallest kid in class. Teachers noticed how he stayed late to help others, or sprinted across the field with a speed that left crowds breathless. That boy's destined to be somebody, old neighbors would say, shaking their heads in wonder. His heart swelled with hope every time he heard it, clutching close to the dream that one day, forbidden love or not, he could rise above the class difference that shadowed his family. Still, prejudice and racism often came knocking. Some parents clutched their daughters tighter when Marcus walked by, as if his skin alone was a threat to their family reputation. He'd come home, eyes wet with tears of love for a life he hadn't even lived yet, whispering to his mother that one day they'd all move out of that crumbling street. She'd wipe his cheeks with calloused hands, whispering, "Count the days, baby. Hard work pays off." Her voice was hope wrapped in a lullaby. Evenings found Marcus out on the cracked basketball court, the hoop just a bent metal ring nailed to a telephone pole. With every dribble, he pictures stadium lights, crowds chanting his name, his mother's proud tears streaming down her face. That court was more than escape. It was a promise forever, that if he gave everything he had, one day he'd graduate from more than just high school. He'd graduate from poverty. When college scouts finally came, Marcus nearly broke down right there on the gym floor. A scholarship meant he could chase his destiny and still send money home. At their small celebration, his father raised a chipped glass. "To my boy," he said, voice cracking, "may life-changing opportunity follow you wherever you go." Marcus blinked back overwhelming emotions, vowing that no controlling parents or class difference would ever keep him from making them proud. But even with this new chance, Marcus never forgot where he came from. Each weekend home, he'd slip a little cash into his mother's apron pocket, pretend not to see her tears of happiness. He bought new shoes for the neighbor's kid, helped paint old Miss Lillian's porch. In that neighborhood, true wealth was measured by love and sacrifice, not by fancy cars or family reputation. At night, alone in his dorm room miles from home, Marcus counted days on the calendar, whispering promises into the dark. "One day," he'd say, voice cracking, "we'll all be together in a house that doesn't leak when it rains." Sometimes he laughed bitterly, asking the ceiling, "Funny how destiny toys with us, huh?" But even then, he held tight to faith that years apart were just steps on the road to something bigger. Little did Marcus know, all those lonely nights and whispered hopes were quietly stitching together the start of a powerful love story. One that would demand every ounce of sacrifice he could give, and then some. Because life was already preparing to place someone extraordinary in his path, someone who'd turn every plan upside down. And isn't it strange how the heart can sense a storm long before the first drop falls? Somewhere deep down, Marcus could feel it. The future was coming fast, and it carried both heartbreak and a miracle of destiny wrapped in one breathless package. Marcus hadn't planned on attending the university mixer that night. His schedule was already drowning him between tough classes and brutal training sessions. But his roommate Tyler wouldn't take no for an answer. "Come on, man," he laughed, throwing a tie at Marcus. "You can't spend every night with textbooks. Who knows, maybe destiny's planning to drop something at your feet." Little did Marcus know how right his friend was, or how life loves setting traps disguised as miracles. Across the wide marbled hall, chandeliers sparkled like captured stars. The wealthy students floated by in clusters, dressed in designer clothes that practically screamed family reputation. Marcus kept to the edges, clutching a plastic cup and trying to ignore the eyes that sometimes lingered too long on his skin. Then, just as he was about to slip out unnoticed, he bumped into someone. Literally. Papers flew, laughter burst, and for a heartbeat, time simply paused. When he looked up, he found himself staring into the bluest eyes he'd ever seen. Claire. That was her name, though he wouldn't learn it until a shaky introduction moments later. Her laughter was warm, her touch gentle as their hands brushed gathering papers. In that small collision, Marcus felt something electric spark between them, an emotional connection so immediate it almost hurt. Funny how forbidden love never introduces itself as dangerous. It always starts with a harmless smile. Claire was everything his childhood never included. She smelled an expensive perfume and carried herself with effortless grace, her blonde hair catching a light like silk. Her family was old money, the kind that bought quiet influence and kept skeletons hidden behind polished doors. But there was something restless in her eyes that night, a hint of loneliness that Marcus recognized all too well. Maybe that's why he didn't walk away. They found themselves standing by the balcony, city lights glittering behind them. Small talk bloomed into laughter, laughter into whispered secrets. Marcus told her about his neighborhood, the dreams he held close. Claire confessed how suffocating it felt, living under her parents' expectations. "Sometimes I wish I can just disappear and start over," she admitted, voice cracking. And there it was, the promise forever forming quietly between two young hearts destined to be together. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Their hands brushed, lingered, then finally held, secretly, as if afraid the chandelier's light might expose them. In that stolen moment, Marcus felt a shift. This wasn't just a pretty girl flirting at a college party. This was something deeper, a miracle of destiny that neither of them could name yet. The way she looked at him made every humiliation by in-laws or strangers suddenly seem small, almost laughable. As the party faded, Marcus offered to walk her to her car. They strolled past fountains, whispering in the dark, counting stars and sharing hopes that felt too delicate to say out loud. Claire squeezed his hand and smiled. "I don't know what this is," she said, eyes glistening, "but it feels like I've been waiting for it forever." Tears of love threatened, and Marcus pulled her close, whispering promises that even he didn't fully understand yet. When she finally drove away, Marcus stood there for a long time, heart racing. The night air seemed to crackle around him, as if whispering, "Be careful, this is no ordinary path you're stepping onto." And yet, even knowing the dangers of an interracial relationship in their world, he couldn't make himself turn back. Love conquers all, Or so the old stories claimed. Maybe it was time to find out if that was really true. The days that followed were filled with secret meetings on campus benches, coffee shop corners, and long walks where their fingers interlaced like puzzle pieces. They spoke about everything: family, dreams, prejudice and racism, the future. Each whispered confession was another thread pulling them closer, weaving a tapestry neither wanted to unravel. But life has a cruel sense of humor. Even as Marcus marveled at this powerful love story unfolding, part of him braced for the heartbreak he feared might lurk just ahead. Because sometimes true love walks hand in hand with the sharp edge of sacrifice. And deep down, Marcus could almost hear the clock ticking towards something neither of them were ready to face. It didn't take long for Marcus and Claire's secret meetings to become the highlight of their days. They'd sneak away from crowded halls, finding quiet corners where no judgmental eyes could reach them. Sometimes they just sat in silence, hands holding secretly, savoring the simple miracle of being together. Other times, they traded stories from childhood, laughing until tears of love gathered in their eyes. Against all logic, it felt like they'd known each other for years. Claire adored how genuine Marcus was. Unlike the wealthy boys she'd grown up around, always chasing status and family reputation, Marcus saw her heart first. He listened, really listened, to her hopes, her fears, the small confessions she'd never dared voice. His eyes didn't calculate her worth, they cherished her. And in that soft, quiet way, she fell deeper than she ever thought possible. It was a forbidden love, sure, but wasn't the best kind always a little dangerous? Marcus, on the other hand, found himself captivated by how Claire made him feel. With her, he wasn't just the poor kid from a rough neighborhood chasing scholarships. He was simply Marcus, a young man in love, dreaming of secret meetings and whispering promises under moonlight. It was a new kind of freedom, a break from years spent under the weight of class difference and other people's low expectations. One crisp evening, they lay on a grassy hill just outside campus, watching stars wink to life. Claire rested her head on Marcus's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Do you think we're soulmates?" she asked softly. Marcus kissed her forehead, answering without hesitation. "Yeah, I think we've always been destined to be together, we just didn't know it yet." Those words settled over them like a warm blanket, chasing away every cruel doubt. Their emotional connection only deepened as the weeks rolled on. They started leaving each other little notes, tucked into textbooks, slipped under doors, letters of hope that brightened even the toughest days. Counting days until we're free, one of Claire's notes read. Marcus kept it folded in his wallet, like a tiny, precious promise forever. Every time life tried to pull him back to hold fears, he'd read her words and breathe easier. Still, reality wasn't kind enough to stay away. Sometimes Marcus caught sight of Claire's friends, the wealthy heirs and debutantes who looked at him with thinly veiled disgust. Claire noticed too. One afternoon, she squeezed his hand tighter than usual, whispering, "Ignore them. What we have is stronger than their ignorance." Her words tasted bittersweet, laced with the awareness that prejudice and racism were shadows they'd always have to outrun. Yet, they refused to let fear steal their joy. On weekends, they explored the city like tourists, sharing milkshakes, ducking into small bookstores, dancing on sidewalks to music only they could hear. It was an almost childish rebellion, a way to claim happiness despite knowing heartbreak at home might be waiting for them. Every smile, every laugh was another stitch in their powerful love story. Sometimes Marcus would catch Claire staring at him with tears of love brimming. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he'd tease, brushing her cheek. "Because," she'd whisper, voice trembling, "no one's ever made me feel this seen, this safe." Overwhelming emotions would crash over them then, pulling them into kisses that tasted of both joy and fragile hope. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled around them, Claire pressed her forehead to his. "Promise me something," she breathed. "Promise that no matter what happens, when we've both graduated, we'll be together. That we'll finally start our real life without anyone's permission." Marcus nodded, heart hammering. "I promise forever. Nothing and no one will stop us." In that vow lay every dream they'd ever dared to whisper. But promises, even the sacred kind, are fragile things in a world ruled by class difference and controlling parents. neither of them could imagine the storm quietly brewing just beyond the horizon, a storm that would test every piece of their young, hopeful hearts. The truth has a way of slipping through cracks, no matter how carefully you try to hide it. It didn't take long before whispers of Marcus and Claire's forbidden love reached the echoing halls of her family's grand estate. Claire's parents, the Whitmores, had spent their entire lives curating a flawless image. Old money, spotless reputation, and carefully maintained social circles that never dared to mix with anyone beneath them. To them, the idea of their daughter holding hands secretly with a young black man from a poor neighborhood was more than scandal. It was a direct threat to everything they stood for. When Claire's mother first confronted her, it wasn't with gentle concern, but icy disdain. "How could you be so careless?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "An interracial relationship? Do you have any idea what people will say?" Claire flinched under the weight of that contempt, her heart splintering. All she could manage was a trembling, "I love him," before tears overtook her. But love meant little in a house that measured worth by lineage and bank accounts. Marcus felt the sting of wealthy family disapproval too, though indirectly. The once friendly greetings he received on campus started to dry up. Some of Claire's classmates stopped inviting him to study groups. Professors seemed cooler, less patient. He couldn't prove it was all connected to who he was dating, but deep down he knew. Prejudice and racism wore many masks, sometimes polite, often hidden, but always there, humming like a cruel undercurrent. The worst came one evening when Claire invited Claire with Marcus to a family dinner, hoping maybe they'd see the man she loved beyond the color of his skin. Instead, the night turned into a quiet humiliation. Her father asked loaded questions about Marcus's background, dropping phrases like "your people" and "those neighborhoods" with casual poison. Claire's mother spent the entire meal looking at her wine glass, as if even meeting Marcus's eyes would dirty her. By dessert, Marcus felt smaller than he ever had on those cracked sidewalks back home. Driving home, Claire sobbed into her hands. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel, the other squeezing her knee, whispering, "It doesn't matter, baby. We're stronger than them." But in the silence that followed, both felt a bitter truth settle in. Class difference and controlling parents weren't obstacles they could easily outrun. Love conquers all, they believed. But standing in that car, hearts heavy, it seemed love might have to fight harder than either had ever imagined. Word spread fast among Claire's social circles. Friends who once laughed with her at parties now traded thinly veiled bobs. Some even stopped speaking to her altogether. At a charity gala, an old family friend pulled Claire aside, voice dripping false sympathy. "You're throwing your life away on this infatuation. Think of your future, your family's reputation." Claire smiled politely, then excused herself to the bathroom, where she vomited from sheer anxiety. That night, she whispered to Marcus over the phone, "Is it crazy that even with all this, I still can't imagine my life without you?" Marcus faced his own heartbreak at home. His parents, though supportive, worried deeply. "This kind of love," his mother warned softly, "it's beautiful, but it's dangerous too. You're up against more than just people's opinions. You're up against an entire system built to keep you out." Marcus nodded, holding her hand. "I know, Mama, but I love her. I can't walk away." Tears of love and fear mingled on his cheeks, the weight of sacrifice pressing hard on his chest. Even so, their promise forever burned bright. Claire began writing letters of hope, slipping them into Marcus's locker. "Counting days," one read. "Dreaming of the future they said we could never have." Marcus kept them all in a shoebox under his bed. Each note a small rebellion against heartbreak at home and humiliation by in-laws who hadn't even accepted him yet. Every day they stayed together felt like a tiny miracle of destiny. Sometimes they laughed at the absurdity of it all. Sitting in his old beat-up car, Marcus would say, "Imagine us in 20 years, telling our kids how we fought everyone just to hold hands in public." Claire would grin, eyes sparkling with tears of happiness. "Best bedtime story ever," she'd reply, kissing him with a fierceness that defied every whispered threat from her world. But even as they clung to humor and dreams, the shadows around them grew longer. It was only a matter of time before someone decided love wasn't enough reason to break all these unspoken rules. And far away, beyond anything they could see, certain wheels had already begun to turn. With the weight of the world pressing down on them, Marcus and Claire retreated deeper into secrecy. Their love, once blooming under the sun, now thrived in shadow. They met late at night near the edge of campus, where the streetlights flickered and the wind whispered like an accomplice. These secret meetings became sacred, moments where they could shed the pressure of judgment, controlling parents, and the cruel rules that said they didn't belong together. It was forbidden love, yes, but it was also their lifeline. They held hands secretly beneath tables at quiet diners and exchanged knowing glances during lectures, as if to say, "I'm still here." Each brush of skin carried an electric charge, a silent reminder that true love isn't always convenient. Sometimes it hides because the world isn't ready to see it. And yet, in those hush moments, they felt more alive than anywhere else. This wasn't a teenage fling. This was destiny unfolding. Quietly, deliberately, in defiance of everything stacked against them. Their conversations grew deeper. They talked about trauma, dreams, race, money, fear. Claire opened up about feeling ashamed of love, not because of Marcus, but because of how her family had twisted her view of what love should look like. Marcus, in turn, shared how he used to wonder if a girl like her could ever love a guy like him. But in those moments, there were no masks, no roles, just two soulmates whispering truth into the dark. One night, nestled under a thick blanket in the backseat of Marcus's car, Claire reached for his hand. "Promise me," she said, barely louder than a breath. "When we graduate, no more hiding, no more asking permission. We'll be together, out loud, unapologetically." Marcus kissed her fingers. "Promise forever," he whispered. It wasn't dramatic or flashy. It was quiet and real, the kind of vow that changes everything. From then on, they began writing their future in ink. They dreamed about a small apartment with squeaky floors, where they'd burn toast on sleepy Sundays and decorate with thrift store finds. She wanted to be a psychologist. He would be a doctor. Together, they'd heal people, not just their bodies and minds, but their belief in what love could be. "Hard work pays off," Marcus said. "And when it does, no one will ever call us a mistake again." They began counting days. Claire kept a journal where she crossed off every sunrise until their graduation. "Each X is a step closer to freedom," she told Marcus. "We're building a love no one can erase." He smiled, pocketing another letter of hope. These notes became his fuel, especially on lonely nights filled with overwhelming emotions and whispers of doubt. Still, he clung to their shared vision like a man clings to breath. They spoke often of their wedding, not grand, but meaningful. Claire imagined standing in a simple white dress, crying tears of love while Marcus took her hand. They knew her parents might not be there, but they also knew that powerful love stories don't need an audience, only hearts willing to fight. "Our love is a rebellion," Claire once said, "a miracle of destiny in a world full of rules." Yet even with such fierce hope, reality kept tapping at their door. Every stolen kiss carried the risk of exposure. Every late-night call came with the threat of being overheard. And though they tried to drown out the noise, the truth was always there. Class difference, prejudice, and racism. And a looming sense that the clock was ticking towards something they couldn't quite see. One evening, as they sat on a bench near the lake, Marcus said, "I wish we didn't have to hide. I want to hold your hand in front of the world." Claire leaned on his shoulder. "We will," she said. "One day, we'll walk right through the front door and never look back." Her voice cracked, but she meant every word, and Marcus believed her. Because when soulmates make promises, the universe listens. But promises alone can't stop what's already in motion. And if they sat wrapped in each other's arms, neither of them saw the trap being laid. A cruel plan that would shatter their fragile world and force them apart before their dreams could ever take flight. Life has a vicious way of testing the very things we swear to protect. For months, Marcus and Claire managed their hidden love like a delicate secret garden, watering it with whispered promises and dreaming of the day when no one could tear them apart. But behind velvet curtains and boardroom doors, the Whitmores were plotting. To them, this forbidden love was a stain on their family reputation, one they would go to cruel lengths to erase. Claire's parents weren't content with stern mornings and cold shoulders. They began tightening their grip, hiring a private investigator to track every step Claire took. Her phone mysteriously started glitching, calls dropping without reason. Emails to Marcus disappeared into thin air. It wasn't paranoia, it was deliberate. Controlling parents, after all, knew exactly how to manipulate every string to keep appearances intact. Meanwhile, Marcus was unknowingly walking into their snare. A wealthy donor to the university, close friends with the Whitmores, arranged a private meeting under the guise of offering Marcus a prestigious research opportunity. Excited, Marcus showed up in his best shirt, heart pounding with hope for a life-changing opportunity that might speed up his dream of becoming a doctor. Instead, he walked straight into humiliation. They told him bluntly, break up with Clan or they'd ensure his scholarship vanished. One smug man even leaned back in his chair saying, "You're talented, son. Don't throw it all away over a girl who'll never be allowed into our world. Think of your family, your future." Marcus left that office with his hands clenched so tightly, his nails left crescent moons in his palms. His tears of love for Claire turned into silent sobs of heartbreak that night. When he finally told Claire, her face crumbled. "They did this. They're destroying us," she whispered, voice breaking under overwhelming emotions. Marcus held her close. "No, baby. They're trying to, but we're stronger, remember? We made a promise forever." Still, the fear that all their letters of hope and secret meetings might be crushed by the sheer weight of money and prejudice was impossible to ignore. The next week, things escalated. Marcus received an abrupt letter from the university board. His academic standing was under review due to suspicious allegations of cheating on exams he'd never even touched. It was a trap, perfectly laid, with just enough manufactured evidence to justify suspending his scholarship. Marcus packed his dorm room in stunned silence, each item another nail in the coffin of the life he'd built so carefully. Claire tried to fight it. She confronted her parents in a storm of tears, screaming about injustice, about how love shouldn't be controlled by class difference or skin color. But her mother merely looked bored, swirling wine in her glass. "You'll thank us one day," she said coolly. "This heartbreak at home is far better than a lifetime of shame." Claire realized then that for her parents, her happiness was secondary to appearances. The humiliation by in-laws hadn't even officially started, yet already it stung deeper than she could bear. With Marcus forced to leave school, Claire found herself under near house arrest. Her parents controlled her phone, barred her from campus events, and spun stories to mutual friends that Marcus had been caught in scandal. A cruel twist that shredded his reputation. In dark moments, Claire wondered if they were truly destined to be together, or if their powerful love story was simply a youthful fantasy crushed by reality. Still, every night, Claire snuck into her bathroom, locked the door, and called Marcus from a hidden prepaid phone. "Counting days," she'd whisper, voice shaking. "We'll find a way, I swear." Marcus would close his eyes, gripping the phone like a lifeline. "Promise forever," he'd answer. Those two words became more than a vow. They were the thin thread holding their hearts together. But even the strongest promises can strain under relentless pressure. Neither of them knew how long they could keep this fragile hope alive against parents who wielded power like a sword. And somewhere deep in the silence after their calls, they both feared the same thing, that love, no matter how true, might not be enough to beat a world determined to tear them apart. Time has a strange way of both wounding and healing. After Marcus was forced to leave the university, he returned to his old neighborhood carrying boxes of books instead of medals. Neighbors greeted him with sympathetic eyes, whispering to each other about dreams cut short by prejudice and racism. But Marcus didn't grumble. If anything, his heartbreak at home lit a new kind of fire inside him. He enrolled in a local college, determined to finish what he started. For himself, for his family, and for the promise forever he'd made to Claire. Meanwhile, Claire's world shrank to gilded cages. Her parents tightened their grip, throwing lavish parties to parade her around like a flawless trophy, all while ignoring the emotional connection they had ripped from her life. But Claire kept writing letters of hope, stuffing them in an old jewelry box under her bed. Each one began the same way: "Counting days until you're in my arms again." Her tears of love stained the pages, proof that even under lock and key, her heart still belonged to Marcus. They found clever ways to stay connected. A friend delivered notes for them, tiny folded squares packed with big dreams. Claire would write about her psychology courses, how she longed to help others heal from the same wounds her family inflicted. Marcus scribbled stories of medical rotations, about saving lives with hands that once only knew how to shoot a basketball. "Hard work pays off," he'd write. "One day, they'll look at us and see not shame, but a miracle of destiny." Years passed like that, painfully slow, but full of quiet victories. Marcus graduated from med school, tears streaming down his face as his parents cheered from the stands. Claire finished her degree too, her own parents absent from the ceremony, still ashamed of love that refused to die. But for them, those moments weren't about who wasn't there. They were about finally proving that class difference and old money couldn't snuff out dreams built on sacrifice and undying devotion. After graduation, Marcus moved to a bigger city for his residency. Lonely nights in a tiny apartment became routine, but every evening, he'd find a letter from Claire waiting in his inbox. Dreaming of reunion, she'd always end them. Sometimes, overwhelmed by the distance and all they'd lost, Marcus would press the phone to his ear and whisper, "We're still soulmates, right?" Claire always answered without missing a beat. Destined to be together. Promise forever. When they finally met again in person, 4 long years later, it was like no time had passed. They stood in a crowded train station, hands trembling as they reached for each other. Claire laughed through tears of happiness, clutching Marcus like he might vanish. "Look at you," she whispered, running her hands over his scrubs. "My doctor." Marcus kissed her forehead, voice thick. "My psychologist. We did it, against everything we did." Their renewed promise was more than words now. It was built on countless lonely nights, whispered prayers, and a silent strength that only years apart can forge. They decided not to wait any longer. Why should they? After all, this powerful love story had already survived what would have broken most couples. Together, they searched for a small apartment, laughed over chipped dishes and crooked picture frames. Love didn't need marble floors, just 2 hearts willing to fight. Claire often found Marcus staring at her with that same awestruck look he'd worn back in college. "What?" she teased. Marcus would grin. "Just thinking how lucky I am that you ignored every voice telling you we weren't meant to last." She'd lean in close, whispering, "Maybe destiny's louder than fear." Those simple moments felt richer than any ballrooms her parents could ever show off. And so, in the quiet spaces of their new life, they wrote a different kind of history. Not one defined by wealthy family disapproval or humiliation by in-laws, but by long-distance love that proved true love can thrive even when everything tries to tear it apart. Yet deep down, both knew their journey wasn't quite finished. Life still had chapters to write. Some that might bring tears, others that might finally deliver the sweet, overdue peace they've been dreaming of all along. Marcus and Claire didn't plan a grand wedding. After all they'd endured, the heartbreak at home, humiliation by in-laws, the endless counting of days, they craved something real, intimate, stripped of all pretense. So they chose a small garden behind a cozy chapel, its paths littered with rose petals and soft lanterns swaying in the breeze. It was simple, almost humble, yet it felt like standing in the very heart of a miracle of Bethany. Claire walked down that aisle alone, tears of love already spilling down her cheeks. Her parents' chairs remained heartbreakingly empty, a cruel reminder of the wealthy family disapproval that still hung over them. But when her eyes met Marcus's, all that pain melted into something beautiful. Here stood the man who had whispered promises forever into her soul, who had battled years apart and prejudice and racism just to stand beside her today. Marcus couldn't stop staring. "It's official," he said, smiling if he adjusted his wedding band on his finger. "It's official," Claire replied warmly, her eyes shining with joy. Forever and always. As Claire approached, every memory came flooding back, holding hands secretly behind campus buildings, sneaking midnight calls, sharing letters of hope that promised a future no one else could see. Now, here she was, more radiant than any dream he'd ever dared to have. His heart thudded so hard, he thought everyone might hear it. Was this what undying devotion felt like? When they clasped hands at the altar, it was as if the entire world faded. The officiant's words blurred into a tender hum, drowned by the silent conversation of two soulmates who had already vowed everything to each other long before this day. Marcus squeezed Claire's trembling fingers, whispering, "We made it." She nodded through tears, whispering back, "Love conquers all." Even then, their vows were raw and imperfect. Marcus spoke of the young couple in love who had once dreamed under city lights, of the emotional connection that no controlling parents or class difference could sever. Claire promised to keep choosing him, even on hard days, even when old wounds tried to bleed again. When they finally kissed, the small crowd erupted, but to Marcus and Claire, it felt like they were alone on this earth, wrapped in a sacred bubble of tears of happiness. Later, at their modest reception, they laughed and danced under string lights, stealing little kisses between bites of cake. Marcus twirled Claire around, marveling at how light she felt in his arms, how perfectly they still fit together after all these years. "Worth every lonely night," he murmured. Claire smiled, brushing a tear from his cheek. "Every heartbreak, every cruel whisper. I'd do it all again to stand here now." But not all the tears that night were joyful. Claire found herself slipping away for a moment, standing by a quiet fountain. Alone, she let the grief of parents who chose pride over her happiness wash over her. It was the happiest day of her life, yet tinged with a sadness she couldn't quite shake. Marcus found her there, wrapping strong arms around her shoulders. "They may not be here," he whispered, "but I am. Always." They spent their wedding night in a tiny inn on the edge of town, the old wooden floors creaking under their laughter. They talked until dawn, whispering dreams of future children, building careers that would make all those years of studying worth it. Even without her parents' blessing, Claire felt whole for the first time. Like destiny had finally stopped playing cruel games and handed them a little piece of forever. And as they lay tangled together, heart slowing, Marcus pressed his forehead to hers. "Can you believe it?" he whispered. "We're actually here, married, after everything?" Claire smiled sleepily, her hand finding his. "Of course I can. I was always meant to be. Destined to be together, remember?" Marcus closed his eyes, holding her close, knowing that no matter what came next, they had already won the greatest battle. The victory of love over everything that tried to tear them apart. Life, with all its twisted humor, rarely wraps up stories in neat little bows. Months after the wedding, Marcus found himself standing in a hospital corridor, his heart pounding for reasons far different than love. A nurse had rushed in calling his name, telling him there was an emergency surgery needed. When he glanced at the chart, the name nearly made him drop it. Elizabeth Whitmore. Claire's mother. The very woman who had done everything to destroy their forbidden love. As he scrubbed in, flashes of the past crowded his mind. The humiliation by in-laws, the cruel trap that cost him his first university. But alongside the bitterness came memories of Claire's tears of love, her promise forever that they'd never let hate define them. Marcus inhaled deeply, steadying his hands. "You're a doctor now," he told himself quietly, "a man of true love and sacrifice. You save lives, even the ones who tried to ruin yours." The surgery stretched on for hours, every minute a dance between life and death. Marcus worked meticulously, sweat trickling down his back, whispering silent prayers that destiny wouldn't play another cruel trick today. Finally, he finished the final sutures, stepping back with a weary exhale. Elizabeth Whitmore would live, not because she deserved his mercy, but because Marcus had promised long ago to always be a man Claire could be proud of. Days later, Claire walked into her mother's hospital room holding Marcus's hand. Elizabeth lay there, looking small, stripped of all the elegant armor wealth once bought her. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw them together. "I heard you saved me," she rasped. Marcus simply nodded. The room was thick with overwhelming emotions, every breath heavy with years of prejudice and racism, a family reputation built on pride. It was Elizabeth who finally broke the silence. "I spent so long being ashamed of love, of you two. I thought I was protecting Claire from humiliation, from heartache. But all I did was become the cause of it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She reached for her daughter's hand, then Marcus's. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. Her voice cracked, heavy with regret. If you'll let me, I'd like to try again, to know the man who loves my daughter more than his own pride. Claire wept openly, clutching her mother's frail fingers. Marcus placed his hand over theirs, a silent promise that maybe, just maybe, true love could heal even this. It wasn't a perfect moment. It didn't erase the years of hurt or the countless lonely nights. But it was a start, a fragile thread of forgiveness spun from shared tears and long overdue words. Sometimes destiny doesn't bring us grand finales, only quiet chances to rewrite the story. They left the hospital that day, hand in hand, Claire resting her head on Marcus's shoulder. Can you believe it? She whispered. All these years, and she finally sees us. Marcus kissed her hair. Miracle of destiny, remember? Even the hardest hearts can change when life strips everything else away. They both laughed softly, clinging to the bittersweet joy that only comes from battles hard fought and finally, mercifully eased. At home, Marcus pulled Claire into the kitchen and spun her around, making her squeal. What are you doing? She laughed. Dancing with my wife, because today feels like a brand new beginning, he said. In that small kitchen with its scratch countertops and thrift store mugs, they celebrated more profoundly than any grand ballroom ever could. Here, there was no family reputation to uphold. Only soulmates building a life together. And though they knew the road ahead wouldn't be flawless, forgiveness, after all, is a journey, not a destination. They step into it willingly, because they had already learned the most important lesson. Love conquers all, not by erasing scars, but by choosing to see beauty in them. Somewhere, destiny was smiling, grateful to witness two hearts that had weathered everything, still beating together, stronger than ever. Life didn't suddenly turn into a fairy tale after Elizabeth's tearful apology. Healing family wounds is slow work, full of awkward dinners and moments where old prejudices still peeked through cracked veneers. But Marcus and Claire faced it all hand in hand, whispering promise forevers that they'd get through this the same way they'd survived everything else, together. In many ways, it was these imperfections that made their powerful love story even more real. Claire began inviting her mother over for coffee, little by little rebuilding a bond that once seemed beyond repair. Elizabeth sat at their modest table, sipping from chipped mugs, her eyes darting nervously to the happy photos on the walls. Pictures of Marcus and Claire dancing, holding hands secretly, laughing under city lights. Snapshots of a young couple in love who had fought the entire world just to exist without shame. Sometimes tears of love welled up in Elizabeth's eyes, though she rarely let them fall. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to rise in his medical career. His patients adored him, not just for his skill, but for the way he listened, truly listened, to their fears and dreams. Claire, now a practicing psychologist, often teased him at night. Pretty funny that two kids nearly torn apart by class difference and prejudice now spend their days helping other families heal. Marcus would grin, pulling her close. Miracle of destiny, babe. Who could have guessed? They never stopped counting days, only now it wasn't toward reunion, but toward new adventures. Weekend trips to small coastal towns. Late-night drives just to find a pie shop still open. They'd sit on park benches, whispering about future children, giggling over which features might come from who. If we have a girl with your eyes and my stubbornness, Claire mused once, Lord help us. Marcus laughed. Or a boy with your compassion and my appetite, who'll be broke on groceries alone. Elizabeth started coming to these family gatherings too. Awkward at first, yes, but slowly thawing. One evening, as they all sat around a backyard grill, she reached out and squeezed Marcus's hand. No words, just a silent apology repeated in every tight squeeze. It was forgiveness that didn't need speeches, only quiet gestures to say, I see now what true love looks like. But life wasn't done testing them. A medical scare sent Claire rushing to Marcus's hospital one stormy night, her hands trembling as she clutched her own test results. Marcus held her face, whispering, whatever this is, we face it together. Tears of overwhelming emotion ran down her cheeks. When the final call came that it was only a scare, they collapsed into each other, laughing through sobs, once again reminded that love conquers all, even their worst fears. As time rolled on, They threw themselves even deeper into their work. Marcus championed programs for kids from poor neighborhoods, like the one he grew up in, hoping to show them that hard work pays off, that destiny could rewrite even the bleakest beginnings. Claire began offering free sessions to struggling couples, guiding them through heartbreak and shame, whispering gently that soulmates are worth fighting for. On their 5th anniversary, Marcus surprised Claire with a small band concert in the same park where they'd once promised forever. As the first notes floated up into the night, Claire burst into tears. "You kept every promise," she whispered, burying her face in his chest. Marcus smiled through tears of his own. "So did you. Look at us, 2 stubborn kids who proved the entire world wrong." They danced under fairy lights, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and even Elizabeth, who wiped her eyes more times than she'd ever admit. Somewhere in the laughter, the soft music, and the smell of fresh-cut grass, Marcus realized that the chapter once filled with heartbreak at home had become the sweetest proof that undying devotion and powerful love stories aren't just fairy tales. They're built, painfully and beautifully, one stubborn day at a time. And as the night wound down, Marcus pulled Claire close, whispering, "Ready for the next adventure?" She grinned, tears sparkling. "With you? Always." Because some stories don't end. They simply open new pages, inviting destiny to keep writing miracles. And for Marcus and Claire, that promise was perhaps the greatest gift of all. Funny how love doesn't always look the way the world tells us it should. Sometimes it shows up messy and inconvenient, tangled in tears of love and whispered promises spoken when nobody else is listening. Marcus and Claire prove that. They took a forbidden love and against every cruel odd, turned it into something breathtaking. Their story isn't just about romance. It's about courage, sacrifice, and believing that true love is worth any battle. Think about it. Would you have fought that hard? Held on when your own family tried to tear you apart? Faced humiliation by in-laws, ugly rumors, years apart? All just to stand by the person destiny carved out for you. Because that's what makes their journey so powerful. It forces us to look inward and ask, what would I risk for the person who makes my soul feel seen? Do you think the universe was fair to them? Was destiny cruel for making them crawl through so much pain just to reach each other? Or maybe it's exactly those scars that made their love story unbreakable. Because sometimes it's the hardest chapters that lead to the sweetest pages. And hey, what about you? Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? Do you believe love can conquer all, even family reputation, racism, and years of heartbreak? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story, or simply share if this one touched something deep inside you. If you enjoy stories like this, the kind that dig into your chest, stir your heart, and leave you thinking long after the video ends, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I promise, there are many more powerful love stories waiting here just for you. Because at the end of the day, we're all just hoping to find someone who'll look past every flaw, every obstacle, and still say, "You're mine forever."